providing affordable housing rental subsidies. Here we've just highlighted, and just in terms of context, that is a very deep subsidy provided program. The average monthly voucher is $1,205. The program is in total runs about $22.1 million to operate. 95% of our housing choice voucher participants that reside within the county jurisdiction live within CAFs. Another benefit of what I mentioned about this program serving our most vulnerable, it is mandated by HUD that we admit 75% of our participants have to have incomes at or below 30% AMI, and then 25% have to have incomes at 50% AMI and below. And so we are projecting that we'll serve 1,528 clients or participants in FY24. Next slide. All right. This is our permanent supportive housing program. It's a combination of federal, state, and locally funded rental subsidies to support low-income adults with disabilities, live in the community, many in scattered site apartments. We did not request additional rental subsidies for the FY24 budget cycle, but we do project to serve 379 households. This gives you sort of the budget breakdown of where our funding resides. Next slide. However, we did request in the budget an additional $100,000 for ongoing support to contract with a third-party inspection firm to assist the program in conducting housing quality standard inspections, or HQS inspections. Many of us has participated in the initial Serrano inspection process in the 2021, I think, here it was. We also work closely with CPHD and many advocates in that 2022 Aging CAF Strategies report, as well as reviewing the joint subcommittee report. And so taking on that task of making sure that, we are the eyes and ears of what's happening within our CAF properties, that we enhance our housing quality standards to enforce property conditions more broadly, as well as identify the resources needed to ensure oversight of our CAF properties. We realized through the Serrano, where we are particularly our PSH program, housing specialists were increasing their annual inspections. Locally only inspections at move-in were performing. And as we began to roll out new landlord funding agreements, we've added up additional HQS inspection oversight, as well as further defined abatement proceedings, as well as making sure that there are tenant protections written into those that are contracted with us to provide PSH housing. But the load of additional HQS inspections for our specialists is a bit overwhelming, and with high caseloads, it's pretty hard to navigate, continuing to follow up on the deficiencies, as well as providing tenant case support, intensive case management. So we're looking to outsource the HQS component from our housing choice, for our PSH specialists, as well as bring some additional support to our housing choice voucher program as well. I think Anita highlighted today, we only have 2 inspectors for HCV. While they do a bang-up job, there's still a lot more that we can do in terms of our ongoing engagement and oversight. So that is also in the budget. Next slide. And also improving the conditions also means that we need dedicated support in how we onboard new landlords within our programs. And we realize we need to continue to educate property management staff on housing assistance programs and their responsibilities, particularly when there is sometimes turnover. So adding a specific landlord engagement analyst would be a dedicated position that can essentially help with us update and implement new rental standards across our programs. We have some portals such as Rent Cafe through a client management system at the Housing Assistance Bureau that we just need to turn on, and we need someone to provide that technical assistance with, all the communication aspects that we can do through that resource. Not only how payments and the reconciliation can be made, but also HQS in terms of communication between landlord and our agencies, correcting deficiencies. There's some automation there that can make this much more an efficient, seamless process as well. So we're looking forward to bringing on an FTE that will help us with technical assistance, education, and outreach. That is it on my end.
Thank you, Nicole and Marie. And I think everyone on the commission is aware that I had an opportunity to meet with Ann Benicia and Marie, as well as Nicole, earlier this week. And I also represented the commission this afternoon before the county board, providing comments on the budget, and had heard the same presentation earlier today. So thank you for that again. And I've been here since 3. Any particular questions that people have? I am happy to walk through some of the draft recommendations that I had sent out to the commission.
I have a couple.
Sorry. Sorry. Alice has a poll comment. My bad.
No, she is, because she keeps texting.
Kellen, did you
Go ahead,
did
Alice.
you call on me?
Yes. It's your public comment on the budget.
Oh boy, I'm half asleep over here. Okay, so it's Alice Hogan with the Alliance for Housing Solutions. I'm sure you saw the information. We agree with a lot of the preliminary comments that Kellen had shared with the commission. Our, biggest concern is about the AHIF, to see half the allocation that we have gotten, close to over the last few years is really concerning. We've seen analysis from staff over the last several years that to get to the AHIF-CAF goals from the plan, we would need approximately $50 million each year to create those units. So we can see every year that we're way below even half to a third of that amount. We just keep getting behind. Now we have gotten, wonderful additions through Barcroft and Crystal Houses will come in and some others, but we still have thousands of units to go. So when we know about things like the Barcroft, Crystal Houses, Serrano, historic Ballston Park, I mean, the list just goes on and on of opportunities and projects that we want to, step up to while they are available to us. So, the conversation has always been about a budget line that could be a permanent source, and so that's what we're up against yet again this year, is that we're relying on annual funding and one-time funds that come in. And what we really need is a permanent source to figure out how to get a lot of AHIF coming on a regular basis rather than advocacy and hoping and wondering. And then our nonprofit partners don't know what to depend on. So here we are this year, there's no NOFA at all. So we have to kind of keep that going so that they can continue to produce what the county needs for us. So that's the main thing. And then there are other things. We talked tonight about inspections. So it sounds like the inspection that's budgeted is a 1-year allocation. So in the future, how will we get the rest of those inspections done? So again, could we have something more permanent or long-term? And then we have costs that'll come up. Fair housing, we're going to have new costs. The housing grant program we just heard about will have recommendations coming. So there are a lot of demands on housing and also planning. The planning department is intimately, connected with us for Plan Langston Boulevard, missing middle, implementation, the Barcroft, many projects there, and they're losing a planner position. So we need more positions, not fewer. So that might be another one you'd consider. And then I did learn today that DHS has housing choice voucher, 200 vouchers that they cannot put out because there's not staff to support them. So there are needs across the scale that would really hope you all take a good look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Eric, you had questions?
Yeah, well, so speaking to what I think this was really a question from Melissa, who's not here, but so Alice is speaking to the NOFA, and I actually have this question too. So we're not doing a NOFA for AHIP this year. And whatever AHIP money we're going to get is already accounted for, essentially. That's what the budget says. But Helen reminded me recently that when we last did a NOFA, there were, what, 4 or 5 projects? 3 applications. So, like, are those still lingering? Do we know? Like,
one of the applications they're not currently pursuing.
okay.
The other one that was not selected was the Site B,
Right.
Marbella Site B.
So it's just,
And I can't,
Sure.
can't speak to what half of those plans are.
Sure. I bring it up because it's like I agree with what Alice is saying, which is that, like, obviously, like, we have this huge financial commitment in Barcraft, and then the debt service, like the debt issues are massive, and that is paramount. But like, it's harder to develop in Arlington, and we still want to encourage our developer partners to want to pursue stuff here. And so, like, they're not going to necessarily be, I would say, interested, but they need to know there's predictable sources of AHIP coming down the road. So it just doesn't sound like the proposed amount really cuts it. So that's more of a comment with a question. But I do have a question about Barcroft. And again, I don't know who can answer this, but, like, there's, and again, this Melissa, another thing Melissa's, I think, overseeing. But do we feel like we have enough support there as far as, like, communicating what the county and Gyre Lynch are doing there? I know that there's been some organizers over there, and I know that certainly the county is doing a lot of work there to work with Gyre Lynch to make sure that the correct type of information is conveyed. But still, there's some, there's been some challenges, I guess is a good way to put it. So do we feel like we have adequate staff support for that as an ongoing project, as far as, I don't know, like being on site, working with Gyre Lynch, et cetera?
I can speak a little bit to that, Eric.
Sure.
We have a Barcroft. I mean, there are several different Barcroft sort of working groups within the county, and folks working on the master development and financing plan. There are a lot of us who are working on just the resident service, or the resident services and the asset management, and how the renewals are rolling out and that sort of thing. Our comms department is very involved with anything that's going out and communicating with the residents. So I do feel that there are quite a few. There's just a lot of people involved, and a lot of people touch it in different ways. So I think there's plenty of staff support. Could we use more? Of course, but things are moving along as how it was planned, and now it's time for when the master development and financing plan is presented to the board. That's a biggie that's coming, and then obviously projects will happen once that is presented.
Thanks, Marie.
Other questions?
I'm sorry, and it's like, Murray, how does the developer contributions compare to, like, years past? Like 3-ish million.
So in all honesty, so that I think it's 3.2. I can't remember which one's 3.6 and 3.2, 3.6 or 3.2, but we track those. In fact, it's Sarah who tracks those, and she is she's very connected to the planning department, and when those site plans are coming through, and when things should be delivered. There is some movement there if something doesn't happen on time, or if something's delayed or something like that. They are all over the map. We could get 10 million, one year, and we can get, a little over 2 million or something like that. So, on average, it's probably right around there, maybe a little bit low, but on average over the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, it's probably about, what it has been.
Other questions?
I just wanted to follow up with Nicole on Alice's comment that we've got 200 vouchers that we can't get out on the street because of a lack of staff. Is that in fact the case?
Yeah, Alice, I'm wondering if you're referring to Anita's comment about the Culpeper transition.
I think Nicole, during the county budget work session, they talked about how we're not able to give out all the vouchers that we potentially can, but that, my understanding, was not a staffing issue. It was the amount that we give out is much higher than sort of typical, so that we run out of money before we can
It's
give
our
out the other
payment
200.
That's
It's our
correct.
payment standards.
That's correct. And that's not
okay.
an Arlington,
Yeah.
Issue.
Yeah.
That's just the way the HUD math works. You get an allocation, they give you a dollar amount, but the rents here are much more expensive than the allocations we're able to serve. So that's a condition of the market. Yes, not related to
Okay,
staffing.
no, I'm all good. I'm all good.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. I must have misunderstood that. She did also mention that there are 65 people on the waiting list for permanent supportive housing. Could you speak to that?
Yes.
And sorry about the confusion on the other one.
No, it's okay. Yes. Well, I mean, we've always had a wait list for PSH. Obviously, the demand outpaces the number of units that we have available, particularly dedicated units that we typically will get as a result of, the AHIF contributions and those competing and supplying dedicated PSH stock. And so to counter that, I mean, we have been fortunate with our state PSH funds to onboard a housing locator, and we're going to have to hit, street pavement and look for rental properties outside of the traditional CAF that we usually rely on. But yes, we have a wait list for PSH, and that has been really since the inception.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Okay. So I think just some of my take on the budget, housing grants, essentially flat, budget, permanent supportive housing, essentially flat with the addition of the 100,000 for the inspections. Eviction prevention is, there's 3 million in one-time funds that's being added. Last year we were spending 5.4 million, but that was with a bunch of federal money and money from other sources. So this is, I think it's about 600,000 that's ongoing, and the 3 million that would be one time. And my understanding too is that the county plans to phase that out over time, so that we're not spending as much, which I have some concern about. Yeah, we don't have to get into that tonight. AHIF is slashed in half, which is very concerning to me. And it's pretty much all going towards like debt service or like Crystal House, which is already a committed unit. And my understanding is that there's, at this level of funding, there is no additional funding for new projects coming forward in the future, which is, we're never going to meet our goals if we don't provide the funding for it. And that includes things like the Serrano, rehabilitation or redevelopment, any other projects that could be coming up. The Columbia Pike tax increment financing area, I didn't have an issue with this. The board actually had a lot of questions. I know Takis said he had a lot of concerns about using the TIF for this, even though staff had said that this is kind of one of the intended purposes. I don't have any strong opinions on that.
Can I interrupt you real
Yep,
quick
go ahead.
there? I mean, is his concern because we're I want to say stealing, but we're using money from the TIF that maybe otherwise would have been utilized for other development on the Pike for this liability, this obligation now, which is exists because the Fed keeps raising interest rates, and now we got to pay a lot more in debt servicing.
That's from the brief conversation we had in the hallway.
That's basically it. Okay, I mean that would be my concern too, except we got to pay the piper, right? right? Like, we gotta find the money.
Yeah. If you're not using that, so.
I mean, whenever we were gonna save Barcroft, I mean,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
always gonna be a massive hole. So, anyway,
Yeah.
sorry.
The Office of Human Rights, is getting, is this like 80,000 more, than last year, which is good because the budget was cut last year. And 50,000 of that goes towards fair housing testing, which they haven't done since 2019. Though my concern with that is they know, and the county has said in the draft regional fair housing plan, we have to expand the testing to more than just race and national origin, but that's not reflected in this dollar amount. This is the same amount that they've done every other year, and it only includes 2 categories that they test for, even though there's 11 protected classes in Virginia. So, you know, I don't understand why they can't add another $20,000 and add another category. Yeah, so that's one of my recommendations. Other housing programs, I think it was brought up that CPHD they're proposing eliminating one of the planner positions. There was a lot of discussion amongst the planning commission chair as well as the board about that, and are we shortchanging ourselves? Because similar to what Ann was saying with the housing division, that we're doing the best with the resources we have, but we don't necessarily have enough resources to do all the things that we've committed to or need to do. And planning feels like they're in the same boat, that the board was asking them to look at doing, it was like gross site area.
Or the gross floor area
There we go.
analysis. Yeah.
I think so. Or maybe, I don't know.
They also want to look at like single family home, like zoning districts just generally.
Yeah. And so the board was
I
like,
think it's a lot coverage study.
there we
There
go.
you go.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like,
Yeah, so the board was very interested in that, and other board members kind of brought up like, hey, right now we're proposing to eliminate planning positions, and you guys are saying we want, you know, planning, please do more studies than what you already have planned.
if we want to look at community land trusts, we need good staff.
Yeah. So under this budget, that seems to be at risk. The CAF inspections, which were brought up, I know the language that the presentation uses kind of like, we'll work with the county manager to continue this. The budget's cut for inspection. So last year they had 150,000 from local funds plus 50,000 from the American Rescue Plan to do the 2,000 unit inspections for CAFs that are happening, I think, next month or in May. That's right now not planned to continue. The manager, when I brought that up and the board was like, yeah, why are we doing that? It was like, oh, that, yeah, my bad. We should look at probably using some of the, I think it's 4.5 million in contingency planning that he has set aside potentially for that. I think they should just allocate it. We're not going to meet the 20% CAF inspection goal without additional funding. We can't do it with existing resources. So I definitely think we should include that as a recommendation that they add that money back in. I don't know if people had any questions about the homelessness services or the digital equity sites, but I just wanted to include that in here because they were housing related and were related to things that people had brought up in our annual work plan. So my recommendation then to the commission is that we would include in our letter to the county that they increase AHIF funding to FY23 levels, which is 18.7 million instead of the 9.7 million that they're currently proposing. Provide adequate funding for the implementation of long-term strategies for improved oversight, basically all the Serrano-related recommendations. That includes the funding for the CAF inspections, as well as increased staffing for CPHD. Last year, we talked about deputy director position, someone who can assist Ann and the division with moving a lot of these recommendations forward. Having participated in some of the discussions with county staff around setting up like tenant associations and resident councils, I know staff is doing the best with the resources they have. I consider it a glacial pace, and it's frustrating to be on the outside and see things that take 9 months, and you're like, if this shouldn't take that long, but people are pulled in many different directions, and they don't have enough staff to do what they're supposed to be doing, so the timelines get extended much, much further. And then provide adequate funding for the implementation of the regional fair housing plan. So this hasn't been approved by the board yet, but it will be this summer. And my guess is that they're thinking with this is, well, we'll worry about that in FY25, like a year after it's been approved, even though it'll be approved this year likely, this fiscal year. But I think at the very least, they should provide additional funding to expand the fair housing testing, because that is included in this budget, and it would just be a paltry sum of money for them to add an additional category or two. And then provide adequate funding for the implementation of the county's strategic plan to functionally end homelessness in the next 4 years. Again, DHS is still going through that strategic planning process, but just reminding them that this is important, this is a goal that we care about, and we want the county to be focused on, even if there's no specific dollar figure associated with that. And then kind of near and dear to my heart, provide adequate funding for regular equity analysis for all housing and planning projects. We saw that with missing middle housing, where they went through and they said, here's the impact of this and the different options on people of color within our community. That's fantastic. We should have that for all of the projects that come before us if we're, as a community, committed to equity. But we don't have funding to do that for anything else right now. And it's something that I know staff cares about and wants to do, but we just don't have the resources in place. So I think that's an important ask to go back to the county and say, you need to provide funding to do this if you actually take equity seriously.
I tweak that language a little bit. So we gotta get out of here. So I love all those and I want to support all of those, right? The last one, if I could tweak the language to say, basically just to give the example of the missing middle housing study as a situation where housing and planning staff, and it's great, collaborative process, did that. Has the county, is that a policy to do that going forward? Are we asking both for a policy and for funding?
That's a good question, I think. As far as
is an equity analysis envisioned, like you're talking about? Projects.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Well,
You're asking about.
Yeah, so Kellen has a recommendation about an equity analysis for housing and planning projects, and had given the missing middle housing study as an example where there was an equity analysis done in that effort. Is there a similar policy or thought that similar types of equity analyses will be done in future housing or planning efforts? Very broad question.
And Kellen said a little bit about this. It's something that housing and planning staff, we are working with Samia Bird, the county's equity officer, to see what types of equity analysis we can bring going forward. And so, as Kellen said, it's in progress with the resources that we have. We have, I would say, I think it was maybe in the last year and a half, we did start including in our housing, CPHD housing board reports, an equity analysis for all of our development projects coming forward. So it is a start to that. It's certainly, the analysis that we include, it's not nearly as extensive as what was done for the missing middle housing study.
Sure.
But anyway, so yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's a great answer.
I will also say that it's, at least from the federal perspective, it's part of HUD's strategic 5-year strategic plan. So anything, I'm assuming that any grants that are competitive would have that as a component that would make you more competitive.
An equity plan
submitted
with the grant.
To display that equity is, that whatever you are doing is done equitably.
And
If that's the correct term.
it's one of the regional fair housing goals in the regional fair housing plan, like part of the regional goals for large projects, for localities to adopt doing an equity analysis of, you know, the impacts. I think also as part of that, it's not just of the impacts, but making sure you're engaging with populations that are impacted by it.
That's
as part of the
actually another
process.
component of the new regulations out on comment, right? So it'll probably, yeah. Which will be for the CDBG and stuff. So does that mean the county will have to talk up some of the need to manage? Potentially, so.
Any other questions before we hear a motion on adopting or any amendments to, other than the amendment that Eric offered?
I'm good with it.
Is your language about the questions in the survey in there, or am I dismissing? You said
No,
that
he-
the categories?
He sent, this is what he sent out.
Oh,
Or-
okay.
Yeah, Colin sent out like an analysis.
Yeah, I was looking at it.
Okay.
You mentioned.
Yeah, so that's the provided additional funding for the Office of Human Rights to do expanded fair housing testing in FY.
You mentioned like some specific questions about additional categories.
It's
Ye-
additional categories.
Yeah, that's the
Like
expanded
fair
fair housing
housing,
testing.
Right.
Like,
And we can
so-
get more specific
Got
in
it.
the
Okay,
letter.
okay, sorry. We'll shut up.
And we'll give you more than 24 hours to review the letter.
Sorry, I was not trying to be annoying. I want to contribute and
Yes.
I just didn't have the time to.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Go ahead, do it.
Motion to approve with Eric's modifications.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second, and any objection? We can just do that. Great.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. We are going to next development updates because there are none. And Karen, are you okay with us moving the homeownership subcommittee
Sure, we
updates
can wait till next month.
Okay. Then the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Appreciate everyone's patience and ability to
Yeah.
get